At 1:47 a.m., Ivy Holloway lifted a glass to her dead husband, and the man in booth 6 mouthed the name of the object she had hidden inside her purse for 2 years. He did not raise his voice, point, or threaten her. He merely looked at the black evening bag pressed against her side and shaped one word with his lips: lipstick. The whiskey stopped an inch from Ivy's mouth. Her hand tightened around the stem while the rooftop bar continued moving around her, all low piano, dim lamps, and late-night conversations no one intended to remember. She had not worn red lipstick since Daniel's funeral, yet an old, scratched tube lay beneath her handkerchief, aspirin, and car keys. No one alive was supposed to know she still carried it. Her phone vibrated against the table. The message appeared beneath Daniel Holloway's name, even though his number had been disconnected after his death. "Put the red tube on the table, or Nora learns what her father did." Ivy lowered the glass without drinking. Across the room, the man in booth 6 remained still. Long, dark hair rested loose against his collar, and the city lights behind him sharpened the outline of a face she had seen in newspapers for years. Merrick Vesper was 40, if the profiles were accurate, and carried the kind of reputation that made accuracy feel optional. The papers called him a criminal strategist, a waterfront king, and the architect of the Harbor 9 massacre. No prosecutor had proved the last accusation, but 9 people had died inside a warehouse, and fear had done the work that evidence could not. Ivy had seen Merrick's name on Daniel's stolen records. She had spent 2 years believing the man in booth 6 would kill her if he discovered what she possessed. Merrick glanced at her glass, then toward the bartender. His expression did not change, but the bartender stopped wiping the counter and disappeared through a service door. A man in a gray jacket near the railing also turned away too quickly. Merrick lifted 2 fingers and pointed, not at Ivy, but at the drink. "Do not touch it again." His voice barely carried over the piano. Ivy looked at the whiskey and remembered the gray-jacketed man brushing past her table while she took Daniel's annual memorial call from an empty voicemail box. She had watched the bartender pour the drink, but not the glass during the 30 seconds she looked away. "You saw someone tamper with it?" she asked. Merrick gave one small nod. "A man working for Jonas Pike." The name struck with the force of a hand against her back. Jonas had been Daniel's business partner, dinner guest, and smiling witness at their wedding. He had also spent 6 months sending Ivy photographs of Nora leaving class, entering grocery stores, and walking home alone. Until tonight, he had never said what he wanted. Ivy stood, careful not to touch the table. Her black dress had been cut for the body she owned rather than the body strangers thought a grieving woman should hide. At 35, she had learned that men often mistook curves for softness and quiet for consent. Merrick did not make either mistake. His eyes tracked the room, the exits, and the hand she kept near her purse. "I am leaving," she said. "You can," Merrick replied. "The man near the elevator will follow you, and Jonas placed a tracker beneath your car before midnight." The elevator doors opened as if summoned by his words. The man in gray stepped toward Ivy with a courteous smile and one hand inside his jacket. Merrick did not rise. He simply turned his face enough for the stranger to recognize him. The smile vanished, and the man continued past the elevator as though he had never intended to stop. Ivy crossed the room and slid into the far end of booth 6, leaving space between herself and Merrick. He placed his coat over the table so no one across the bar could see her purse. The act felt protective until she remembered that protection could be another form of possession. "You knew Jonas would contact me tonight," she said. "I knew he would try." "And you watched him poison my drink?" "I watched his man approach your table. By the time I saw his hand move, the glass had already been touched." "That is not an answer." Merrick held her gaze. "I used you to draw Jonas into the open. I expected surveillance, not the drink." The honesty made her angrier than a lie would have. "So I was bait." "Yes." No apology followed. Merrick reached into his coat slowly and placed his phone on the table where she could see it. The screen showed a photograph of her lake house taken that afternoon. Jonas stood beneath the cedar awning while a locksmith replaced the front cylinder. "He wants you frightened enough to retrieve the film," Merrick said. "He searched the house yesterday and found nothing. He changed the lock so you would know he had entered." Ivy's eyes moved to her purse. "You know what is inside the tube." "I know Daniel stole an index to an evidence archive. I know the archive contains records on politicians, judges, police officers, and the men who arranged Harbor 9. I know Jonas believes the physical key is hidden inside something Daniel's first wife once owned." Nora's mother had carried the red lipstick on her first date with Daniel. After she died, Daniel kept the tube in a cedar box with photographs and a lock of her hair. Ivy had found it in his coat the night his car went through a barrier and sank into black water. Her phone vibrated again. "Nora leaves the university design lab at 2:15. Should I send her a car?" Ivy called her stepdaughter before fear could settle into thought. Nora answered on the fourth ring, breathless and annoyed, with the sound of voices and cutting tools behind her. Ivy told her to leave the building through the east exit, avoid her car, and walk to the brightly lit hospital hotel 6 blocks away. "Is this about Dad?" Nora asked. Ivy looked at Merrick. He watched without interfering. "Yes," Ivy said, "and I have not told you enough." A pause followed. Nora was 22, old enough to hear the weakness in that sentence and young enough for it to hurt. "Who is with you?" "Merrick Vesper." The silence lasted longer this time. "The man accused of Harbor 9? "Yes." "Do you trust him?" "No," Ivy said, "but I believe the man threatening you is more afraid of him than he is of me." Merrick wrote an address on a napkin and slid it across the table. Ivy gave it to Nora, told her to wait beneath the lobby cameras, and promised she would arrive within 20 minutes. Nora did not argue. That frightened Ivy more than anger would have. Merrick led her through a private stairwell and into the rain. A gray-haired woman waited behind the wheel of a dark sedan, while another car idled half a block away. Merrick introduced the driver as Elena Ward, a former federal court security officer who now managed civilian protection for people who had reasons not to trust the police. Ivy stopped beside the open door. "Is Elena one of your people?" "She works for herself," Merrick said. "I pay her and she refuses instructions she considers reckless." Elena looked at him through the mirror. "Frequently." Merrick gave Ivy a choice between riding with Elena, calling the police from the sidewalk, or walking away alone. He also handed her a sealed evidence bag and told her to place the contaminated glass inside it if she wanted proof later. Ivy returned to the rooftop with Elena, collected the glass using a napkin, and watched the manager preserve the camera footage after Merrick made one quiet phone call. At the hotel, Nora paced beneath a chandelier with an unfinished architecture model held against her chest. One foam board wall had broken loose, and glue marked 2 fingers. She rushed toward Ivy, then stopped when Merrick entered several paces behind her. Nora studied him with the same direct suspicion she had inherited from her father. "What does he want?" "The lipstick," Ivy said. Merrick remained near the edge of the seating area rather than joining them. "I want the archive Daniel concealed. Jonas wants the same thing, but for different reasons." Nora turned to Ivy. "What lipstick?" Ivy had promised more truth. The promise already felt dangerous. She opened her purse and removed the old red tube, placing it in her palm where Nora could see every scratch in the enamel. Nora's face changed. "That belonged to my mother." "I know." "Why do you have it?" "Because your father hid something inside it before he died." Ivy twisted the base. Instead of wax, a narrow metal capsule rose from the casing. Nora stared at it without speaking, and Ivy felt the cost of every safer lie she had told over 2 years. Daniel had been a compliance consultant, she had said. His work was confidential. His death was an accident. The phone calls did not matter. The locked study contained only client records. Merrick asked Elena to secure 2 adjoining rooms under her own company's booking. He did not take the tube, inspect the capsule, or ask Ivy to surrender her purse. Nora noticed. "Why has he not taken it?" she asked. Because he does not know whether there are copies, Ivy said. Merrick's answer came from across the room. And because taking it would make me Jonas. Nora gave him a cold look. That sounds rehearsed. It is not. Elena returned with room keys and 2 new phones still in sealed boxes. She explained that Nora would activate one herself, keep it with her, and decide which contacts were added. A second protection officer was already on the way. Elena also warned that Jonas might control hotel staff through money or pressure, so they would move again before daylight. Nora refused to go upstairs until Ivy explained what Daniel had done. Ivy sat beside her beneath the lobby cameras and told the truth in pieces she could still bear to say aloud. Daniel and Jonas had maintained private records for powerful clients. Some records protected those clients, others controlled them. Daniel stole an index shortly before his death and warned Ivy never to give it to Jonas. What is on the index? Nora asked. Names, payments, file numbers, and a set of records connected to Harbor 9. Nora looked toward Merrick. Does it prove he ordered the killings? I thought it did, Ivy said. I viewed only part of the film. Merrick's expression remained guarded. The evidence used against me appeared too complete. Shipping logs, payments, routes, and witness statements all pointed in the same direction. Perfect evidence is often built, not found. Nora lowered her model to the table. And my father built it? I do not know, Ivy said, though she had feared the answer for 2 years. Elena arranged for a second officer, Tomas Bell, to remain with Nora. He was a retired detective whose name did not appear in the portion of Daniel's index Merrick had reviewed. Nora would stay in a private apartment owned by Elena's company, not a hotel or one of Merrick's properties. The route changed twice, and Elena required verbal confirmation before every handoff. Before leaving, Ivy gave Nora the lipstick tube to hold for 1 minute. Nora turned it in her fingers, studying the object that connected her mother, father, and a secret none of them had chosen for her. You carried this every day? Nora asked. Yes. Because you were protecting me? I told myself that. Nora returned it. That is not the same as answering. The lake house stood north of Seattle beside a narrow inlet, hidden from the road by cedar and wet stone. Ivy arrived with Merrick and Elena shortly after dawn, while Tomas remained with Nora at the apartment. Callum, Merrick's driver, waited outside and documented every vehicle that passed the property. Jonas's locksmith had done clean work. The new cylinder showed no damage, and the door opened with the key Merrick's people had obtained from the locksmith after explaining that the replacement had been ordered under a false identity. Ivy disliked how easily Merrick moved through other people's systems, but he gave her the invoice, the locksmith's statement, and the choice to call the man herself. Inside, Jonas had searched without breaking anything he might later need. Books lay open rather than torn. Framed photographs had been removed and replaced. Kitchen jars had been emptied into labeled bags, then set back on the counter. The methodical invasion carried Jonas's personality more clearly than vandalism would have. Daniel's study occupied the rear corner of the house. An old microfilm reader sat beneath a canvas cover, its cord coiled beside it. Ivy had used it once, 3 nights after Daniel died, and had stopped when she saw Merrick's name beside the Harbor 9 records. Elena found a listening device beneath the desk. It was connected to a small cellular transmitter registered through one of Jonas's archive companies. She sealed it in an evidence bag and powered it down before anyone discussed the film. Merrick remained in the doorway. Did Daniel teach you how to use the reader? 3 days before he died. And you did not ask why? I asked. He told me old systems were safer. Did you believe him? By then, believing him was easier than understanding him. Ivy removed the capsule and unrolled the microfilm with gloved hands. Merrick did not approach until she invited him. Together, they threaded the strip through the reader and watched the first frames appear. Account numbers, sealed case references, names of officials, and symbols that looked like divided black squares. Merrick recognized the symbols as archive location codes. Daniel had not copied every document. He had photographed an index showing where the originals were stored, how they were authenticated, and which records proved one another. The lipstick tube was not merely a hiding place. Fine grooves beneath its enamel formed a physical credential for the archive system Daniel and Jonas had built. Ivy advanced to the Harbor 9 section. A transfer of $200,000 appeared under the name of Anton Vale, one of Merrick's former lieutenants. The date preceded the massacre by 48 hours. "This is why I never came to you," she said. Merrick studied the frame. "Anton had been dead for 6 months. That does not prove you did not use his name." "No. It proves Daniel used a dead man because a living man could deny the transfer." Ivy advanced again. A handwritten note appeared beneath a map of the warehouse. "Vesper route inserted. Access logs rebuilt. JP approved." The initials belonged to Jonas Pike. Merrick said nothing for several seconds, then asked Ivy to photograph the frame with Elena's offline camera. He did not claim vindication. He asked for the next piece of evidence. A second frame showed Daniel's authorization to duplicate Merrick's shipping schedules. A third contained a payment from a political consulting firm to Jonas's company 4 days before the killings. The description read, "Crisis Containment." Ivy's grip weakened around the reader control. Daniel knew. "He knew something," Merrick said. "We still need the original records." The lake house landline rang. Ivy answered on speaker. Jonas's voice carried the warmth he once used while carving holiday dinners in Daniel's kitchen. "I wondered how long it would take you to bring Merrick into that room." Ivy looked toward the sealed listening device. "You have someone watching the house." "I have spent 2 years watching the woman who carries my property. It was Daniel's. Daniel stole from me." "You threatened Nora." Jonas paused. "I reminded you that secrets spread their cost. Put the lipstick tube on the study windowsill, leave the house, and I may forget she exists." Ivy looked at Merrick. He shook his head once, not as an order, but as an assessment. "No," she said. Jonas's voice lost its warmth. "Daniel died because he also confused delay with control. You killed him. I never touched his car." The line went dead. Ivy remained beside the phone, hearing the sentence Daniel had left on her voicemail the night he died. "Please answer. I have made a terrible mistake." She had watched 6 calls arrive and refused them all because she believed the lipstick contained proof Merrick controlled him. Merrick did not tell her to forgive herself. Jonas chose those words carefully. He said he never touched the car. That means he wants you to ask what he touched instead. They left the lake house by a southern service road after Callum confirmed Jonas's observer had moved toward the main entrance. Merrick had not threatened the watcher or staged an attack. He simply sent a tow truck toward the observer's vehicle, forcing the man to move before it was tagged as abandoned. Merrick's private archive occupied the basement of an accounting office near Pioneer Square. The entrance required 2 employees to confirm each other, and the records rooms were isolated from external networks. Merrick showed Ivy the access logs before opening a single cabinet. "You keep evidence on yourself," Ivy said. "I keep records of decisions made under my authority." "Why?" "Because my father called every crime a family necessity. I learned too late that memory always favors the man giving orders." He removed a Harbor 9 file and placed it on the table. Inside were Anton Vale's death certificate, photographs from the funeral, bank correspondence showing the debt account had been reopened with forged identification, and copies of Merrick's own shipping records before they were altered. The original route kept Merrick's vehicles 20 miles from the warehouse. Daniel's reconstructed version placed them at the loading entrance. Ink analysis commissioned years earlier had suggested the log pages were printed after the killings, but the city investigator who ordered the test withdrew it before publication. Ivy compared Merrick's files with the microfilm index. The records matched in small details Daniel could not have guessed. Page numbers, seal impressions, canceled account digits, and handwritten corrections. Merrick's archivist brought a portable overhead scanner, an offline laptop, and 2 encrypted drives. She explained that the equipment photographed physical pages without flattening fragile bindings and created a time-stamped file for every image. Ivy watched her scan Anton's death certificate, the original route, and Daniel's authorization frame. "This is what we take to the private archive," Merrick said. "Not an army, a scanner." Ivy almost smiled, but the moment passed when Nora called Elena's phone. Tomasz had moved her to the secure apartment, and Nora wanted the truth promised at the hotel. Ivy placed the call on speaker. "The first records show your father helped build evidence against Merrick." Nora's breathing changed. "Helped how?" "He copied shipping schedules and inserted a false route. Jonas approved it." "Did Dad know people were going to die?" "I do not know yet." "Do not say that because it is easier." "I am saying it because I will not invent an answer again." Nora stayed silent for several seconds. "Then find the answer." The next section of the film provided it. Daniel's handwriting appeared beneath a list of 9 names. 6 were labor organizers, 2 were accountants preparing to testify about public contracts, and 1 was a city investigator. Beside the list, Jonas had written that Vesper's reputation would hold the blame. Daniel's response was shorter. "People will die." Jonas had answered beneath it. "They already chose to become inconvenient." Ivy stood so quickly that her chair scraped the floor. The film kept moving until another note appeared, written after the massacre. "I built the frame. Jonas built the killing. I told myself there was a difference." Daniel had helped frame Merrick before trying to steal the evidence that proved it. For 2 years, Ivy had carried the lipstick as though it contained the last honorable act of a frightened husband. The film revealed a man who first protected himself, then regretted the cost, then handed the danger to his wife without telling her the shape of it. Merrick turned off the reader and stepped away. He did not reach for Ivy, offer absolution, or use Daniel's guilt to demand the film. "Say something," Ivy said. "What would help?" "Tell me he was afraid." "He was." "Tell me fear made him do it." "It helped him begin. It did not make him continue." The answer hurt because it left Daniel human. Monsters were easier to bury than loved men who had chosen badly. Ivy crossed the archive room and stared at Merrick's sealed boxes. "You let people believe Harbor 9 was yours?" "Yes." "Why?" "At first I fought the accusation. 2 witnesses vanished, a detective's son was threatened, and one of my men died in county custody. Then I discovered the fear protected my business. I stopped correcting people who believed it. So the lie became useful." "Yes." "You were framed for the killings, but you profited from the shadow." "Yes." Merrick's refusal to clean himself completely changed the question between them. Ivy no longer had to decide whether he was innocent. She had to decide whether a guilty man could tell the truth about one crime and accept the cost of exposing others. She placed the lipstick tube on the table but kept her hand over it. "We opened Daniel's archive under my conditions. Nora receives every file concerning her father before publication. Nothing is removed because it harms you. No one named in the records is blackmailed. Independent counsel receives copies before you control them." Merrick listened without interrupting. "You also release your records that authenticate Harbor 9, Ivy continued, "even if they expose crimes unrelated to the massacre. That may send me to prison." "Yes." He looked at the rows of boxes surrounding them, then at the tube beneath her palm. "Agreed." "You answered too quickly." "I decided years ago what the records were for. I delayed because I wanted proof that cleared me without costing the rest." "And now?" "Now I know that version of proof does not exist." Elena arranged the next steps. An attorney named Rebecca Lynn, known for representing whistleblowers and public corruption witnesses, agreed to receive evidence without taking instruction from Merrick. A journalist from an investigative nonprofit waited separately. Neither knew the archive location until Ivy authenticated it. Nora insisted on coming. Ivy refused at first, repeating the same protective instinct that had shaped every lie. Nora responded without shouting. She said Daniel's records involved her mother's property, her father's crimes, and the reason her family had been threatened for 2 years. If Ivy excluded her again, Nora would never know whether the next version had been edited for her own good. Merrick remained silent until Ivy asked his opinion. She should not enter the records rooms, he said, but she has the right to witness the chain of custody and choose what happens to Daniel's personal files. The answer did not remove the risk. It treated Nora as an adult rather than a hostage waiting to happen. They traveled to the private archive company before noon. Jonas owned a controlling share through two shell corporations, but the facility served law firms, hospitals, and research institutions. Public hours, cameras, and ordinary employees made an open attack costly. Elena and Tomas remained with Nora in the lobby. Callum watched the loading entrance from outside. Rebecca Lynn waited in a cafe across the street with a court-approved evidence courier and two sealed containers. The plan required Ivy and Merrick to identify a small set of records, scan them, and physically send the first drive out before continuing. The lipstick tube fit into a shallow credential cradle at the access desk. A red beam passed across the grooves beneath the enamel. Ivy then inserted the microfilm capsule into a mechanical reader that matched the index strip to Daniel's account. The clerk checked the screen. 6 rooms, dual-owner archive. Who is the second owner? Ivy asked. Jonas Pike. The clerk's face revealed that she had not expected anyone else to authenticate the account. She called a supervisor, but the system had already opened the lower corridor. Merrick asked her to preserve the access log. Ivy sent Rebecca a photograph of the authentication screen before descending. Room 1 held legal files arranged by year. Room 2 contained financial ledgers, original signatures, and sealed correspondence. Room 3 held audio recordings, each labeled with dates and account numbers. The scale of the archive stripped away any remaining belief that Daniel and Jonas had merely collected insurance. They had built a government of private fear. Merrick's archivist set up the overhead scanner on a rolling table. Ivy selected 3 categories first: Harbor 9 planning, proof of Daniel's role, and records identifying the officials who financed the killings. Every page was photographed beside its seal and box number. The scanner created identical encrypted copies on 2 drives, while a camera recorded the process continuously. After 40 minutes, Elena came downstairs with the courier. She verified the drive's file count, sealed it inside a numbered evidence container, and carried it back through the lobby. Callum watched her cross the street and enter Rebecca Lynn's cafe. Rebecca signed the receipt and immediately uploaded the encrypted files through her own secure system to a preservation service controlled by neither Merrick nor Ivy. Only after the first evidence package left Jonas's building did they continue. Room 4 contained the Harbor 9 originals. Contracts linked 2 state officials and a redevelopment consortium to private security contractors. Photographs showed the victims entering the warehouse for what they believed was a meeting with a protected investigator. A recording captured Jonas discussing how Merrick's reputation would redirect the inquiry. Daniel's voice appeared on the same recording. What happens if Vesper proves the route is false? Jonas answered, He will not. Men like him make fear useful. In a year, even he will stop asking where the lie began. Merrick turned off the playback unit. His face remained controlled, but Ivy saw the recognition beneath it. Jonas had predicted exactly what happened. Merrick had failed to defeat the lie, then used it until innocence and advantage became entangled. The final Harbor 9 box contained a smaller envelope labeled DH Terminal. Inside were toll camera photographs, a contractor payment, and an audio file recovered from Daniel's car system before Jonas's company collected the wreckage. On the recording, Daniel drove through heavy rain while Jonas spoke through the car's hands-free system. Pull over and give me the index. Daniel refused. Jonas's voice became colder. Then I will send someone to Nora's dormitory. A second engine grew louder behind Daniel. Tires struck water. Daniel cursed, and the pursuing vehicle hit his rear quarter panel once, then again. The recording ended with metal tearing and Daniel shouting Ivy's name. Jonas had told the truth at the lake house. He had never touched Daniel's car. He had ordered another driver to force it from the road. Ivy listened twice. The second time, she heard the fear beneath Daniel's breathing and understood that answering his call might not have saved him. He had already been pursued. Her silence remained a choice she regretted, but it was no longer the weapon that killed him. Nora entered the room after Ivy asked Elena to bring her down. Ivy played the recording without editing it. Nora cried quietly, one hand over her mouth, then asked to hear the beginning again. When it ended, she looked at Ivy. "You thought he was calling to get the lipstick back?" "Yes." "And you believed Merrick was behind him?" "Yes." Nora wiped her face. "I am still angry that you lied." "You should be. But you did not cause the crash." Ivy could not accept the sentence all at once. She nodded because Nora deserved an answer that did not demand comfort. The fire alarm began before they finished scanning the terminal envelope. A recorded voice ordered everyone to use the nearest stairwell. The archive doors unlocked automatically, and red emergency lights replaced the overhead lamps. Elena moved Nora between herself and Tomas while Merrick's archivist sealed the second drive. Jonas controlled the building systems, but the attack was not hidden beneath incompetence. He had waited until the first evidence package left, then created a new objective: seize Nora before the remaining originals and authentication key escaped. In the stairwell, two men wearing facility emergency vests directed evacuees toward separate assembly points. Elena asked one for his employee badge. He showed it too quickly, and the photograph did not match his face. She pulled Nora backward. A steel fire shutter dropped between the landing and the lobby. Tomas caught the edge with both hands, slowing it long enough for Elena to push Nora toward him. One false warden struck Tomas from behind. The other seized Nora's coat. Nora did not freeze. She activated the emergency alert on her new phone and tore the plastic credential tag from the man's vest before he dragged her through a service door. Elena forced herself beneath the descending shutter, but the loading bay door closed before she reached them. She saw a white maintenance van leave without plates and memorized the blue fleet number painted above its rear wheel. The abduction lasted less than a minute. Jonas had used his ownership of the building, false uniforms, a controlled evacuation route, and a prepared vehicle. Elena had not left Nora alone. She had been defeated by a plan designed around the facility itself. Merrick came up the stairs as Tomas lifted the shutter. He listened to Elena's account without interrupting, then asked for Nora's emergency location. The phone had transmitted one position before being shut off, an access road north of the city. Ivy already knew the destination. "The lake house," she said. Jonas called the archive desk phone 3 minutes later. He demanded the original microfilm, the lipstick tube, and Daniel's Harbor 9 box by midnight. Ivy would come alone. Merrick would remain in Seattle. If police approached the property, Nora would be moved and killed. "You cannot erase the copy with Rebecca Lynn," Ivy said. "No," Jonas replied, "but I can prove the files were stolen, incomplete, and manipulated. The original index and seal determine what a court believes. Bring them, and I may allow you to decide how much truth Nora survives." The threat revealed Jonas's remaining strategy. He could no longer preserve the whole blackmail chain. He wanted the originals so he could challenge authentication, destroy the strongest evidence, and escape with one final hostage. Merrick wanted to send men to the lake house immediately. Ivy saw the decision in the way his shoulders changed, the silent calculation of roads, water access, windows, and armed resistance. Then he looked at her and stopped. "What is your plan?" he asked. The question mattered because he meant it. Ivy knew Daniel's lake house better than Jonas did. Beneath the boathouse floor, a maintenance hatch opened onto an old service path that followed the north inlet to an abandoned dock. Daniel had cleared it years earlier as a wildfire exit. Nora had helped him and would remember the route. The plan depended on giving her an opportunity, not treating her as an object to be retrieved. Rebecca Lynn took the first evidence drive directly to a trusted state investigator whose name did not appear in the archive. The investigator obtained an emergency kidnapping warrant and positioned officers beyond the lake property. They would not approach until Nora reached the northern tree line or Ivy activated the transmitter hidden in her coat. Merrick and Callum would cross the inlet by a small fishing boat without lights. They would remain beyond the boathouse unless Ivy signaled. Elena stayed with law enforcement, controlling the evidence release and live audio. The second drive went to the investigative journalist, creating a separate chain Jonas could not recover. Before leaving, Ivy opened Daniel's Harbor 9 box and removed nothing. She photographed the seal, placed the original documents in a court evidence container, and handed them to Rebecca Lynn. Jonas would receive the lipstick and microfilm because those were the only originals he demanded. The records they authenticated were already outside his control. Merrick objected once. "He may kill you after he verifies them." "He may. I can enter first." That is the man Jonas expects, the man who believes force becomes safer when he controls it. Merrick looked toward the sealed evidence containers. "And if your plan fails? Then you act, not before." He accepted the condition without disguising how much it cost him. At 11:30, Ivy left her car 3 miles from the lake house and walked the remaining distance under the gaze of Jonas's men. They searched her coat, purse, and shoes, but missed the transmitter sewn beneath the lining because Elena had not activated it. The lipstick tube rested inside Ivy's glove. The microfilm capsule remained sealed within it. The house glowed through the trees. Every downstairs light was on, and the curtains had been opened so Jonas could watch the lawn. One man stood near the garage, another by the rear door, and a third moved between the study and the boathouse. Jonas opened the front door himself. Silver had spread through his beard since Daniel's funeral, but his smile remained familiar enough to be cruel. "You finally stopped running," he said. "No, I chose where to stand." He searched her again and found the lipstick tube. His relief appeared only in the speed with which he checked the enamel grooves under a small light. "Original," he murmured. "Where is Nora?" Jonas led her into Daniel's study. Nora sat in a wooden chair beside the old microfilm reader, her wrists secured in front of her with plastic ties. A bruise darkened one cheek, but she held Ivy's gaze steadily. The architecture student in her had already studied the room. Ivy could tell from the way Nora looked once toward the baseboard, once toward the hall, and once toward the window facing the north trees. Jonas loaded the film and advanced through several frames. He compared the index numbers with photographs on his phone, verifying that Ivy had not substituted a copy. "You sent the Harbor 9 box away," he said. "Yes. You think scanned pages will survive without the original credential?" The records were scanned beside their seals. The process was recorded. Rebecca Lynn has the drive, the state has a copy, and the physical Harbor 9 box is already under warrant. Jonas stopped turning the reader control. Merrick planned that. No, he wanted more time. That was partly true. Merrick had wanted to scan every room before releasing anything. Ivy had insisted on sending the first package out early. "I made the decision," she continued, "because the archive belongs to the people it harmed, not to the man strong enough to hold it." One guard near the study door looked at Jonas. His confidence had depended on the belief that the evidence could still be contained. Jonas removed the microfilm from the reader. "Copies can be challenged." "They can. That is why the originals are with a court officer." "You are lying." "Call your facility. Ask who signed the emergency warrant." Jonas did not call. His face had already answered. Ivy looked at Nora. "Your father always said the north side of the house had the best view." Nora blinked once. Daniel had never said that. The north side faced dense trees and the hidden path. Jonas noticed the exchange, but misunderstood it. "Daniel left both of you with such loyalty. He would be touched." "No," Ivy said. "He left us with consequences." Nora lowered her bound hands against the edge of the chair arm. An exposed screw near the joint caught the plastic tie. She began working it back and forth while Jonas focused on Ivy. "You protected Daniel for 2 years," he said. "Do not pretend truth suddenly made you brave." It did not. Nora did. The tie snapped. Nora drove the chair backward into the guard's knees, rolled to one side, and ran through the open study door. The second guard reached for her coat, but Ivy stepped into him with all her weight, striking his shoulder and forcing him against Daniel's desk. Jonas seized Ivy by the back of her coat and pressed a gun beneath her ribs. "Nora!" he shouted. "Stop or she dies!" Nora reached the hallway and looked back. Ivy forced herself to remain still. "North side." Nora ran. Jonas dragged Ivy onto the porch while his men followed Nora toward the boathouse. Rain had begun again, thin and cold over the lake. One man entered the boathouse. The other circled toward the water. Merrick remained hidden. Jonas pulled Ivy against him and searched the lawn. "He is here." "Yes." "Then he has learned nothing." A crash sounded from inside the boathouse. Nora had found the hatch beneath the life jackets and dropped into the service passage. Jonas raised his voice. "Merrick, come out or Ivy dies." Merrick stepped from the trees near the shore. His long hair had been tied back and both hands were visible. No weapon showed beneath his open coat. "You were told to remain in Seattle," Jonas said. "I stopped obeying you years ago. Tell your people to leave. There are no people on the property." That was true. Callum waited across the inlet, and law enforcement remained beyond the northern tree line. Jonas pressed the gun harder against Ivy. "Give me the evidence copies." "I cannot." "Then watch her die." Merrick's eyes moved to Ivy, not the weapon. She saw the question there. Act now or wait? She gave the smallest shake of her head. Merrick lowered himself onto one knee in the wet grass and placed his hands behind his head. The gesture stripped away the image Jonas expected to fight. Merrick did not threaten, bargain, or claim he would burn the city for one woman. "You built your plan around my reputation," he said. "You expected me to attack before Nora escaped and prove every story told about me." Jonas laughed without humor. "Kneeling does not make you innocent." "No." The answer carried across the rain. "It means I will not let you choose my next crime." A figure moved beyond the boathouse. Nora emerged from the hidden path at the north tree line, where Elena and two state officers waited beyond Jonas's view. Elena activated Ivy's transmitter. Jonas heard the first police command through the device in Ivy's coat. He turned the gun toward the trees. Ivy dropped her weight and drove her heel down across his foot. His grip shifted. Merrick crossed the lawn before Jonas recovered, striking the gun hand once and forcing it away from Ivy. The weapon fired into the porch roof. Jonas fell against the railing. Merrick could have continued. The opening was clear, and Jonas looked up at him with the certainty of a man who had spent years believing violence would always complete the argument. Merrick stepped back. Jonas lunged toward the gun. Ivy reached it first and kicked it beneath the porch steps. State officers entered from the tree line and ordered everyone to show their hands. Merrick raised his immediately. Jonas looked toward the boathouse, then the driveway, measuring routes that no longer belonged to him. He ran toward the lake. Callum brought the fishing boat across the inlet and blocked the outer dock. Jonas turned back into the arms of the officers approaching from the lawn. They took him to the ground without giving him time for a final speech. The case did not depend on one. The recordings, payment trails, access logs, forged routes, sealed originals, and Daniel's own notes explained Harbor 9 more clearly than Jonas ever would. The terminal recording proved he ordered the pursuit that killed Daniel. The bartender at the rooftop bar identified the man who tampered with Ivy's drink, and the preserved camera footage confirmed the approach. Nora reached Ivy beneath the porch light. They held each other while officers cleared the house, but neither mistook survival for repair. "I heard Dad's last call," Nora said. "I know. You should have told me." "Yes. I do not forgive that tonight. I am not asking you to." Nora nodded against her shoulder. The boundary hurt, but it was honest, and honesty was the first thing Ivy could offer without deciding how Nora should receive it. Merrick remained on the lawn until the state investigator confirmed he could lower his hands. He did not approach Ivy. He gave his statement, surrendered the archive equipment, and provided Rebecca Lynn with access to his private records. By dawn, the first authenticated Harbor 9 files had reached federal and state investigators, 3 news organizations, and attorneys for the victims' families. The public learned that 9 people had been killed to protect a redevelopment scheme involving judges, contractors, police officials, and political consultants. Merrick Vesper had not ordered the massacre. The correction did not turn him into an innocent man. His own records documented bribery, coercion, obstruction, and violence committed under his authority. Merrick released them with the Harbor 9 material and entered a cooperation agreement that required him to dissolve his criminal operations, forfeit businesses built through intimidation, and testify against officials who had once protected him. Jonas Pike was charged with kidnapping, conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction, and Daniel's death. He tried to trade names for leniency, then discovered the names were already public. The blackmail chain collapsed because its currency had been secrecy, and secrecy had left the building before he took Nora. Daniel Holloway's role became public as well. Nora reviewed the personal files before they were released and chose to preserve photographs, letters from her mother, and private memories that proved nothing about the crimes. She gave investigators everything else. Ivy sold the lake house after the trial ended. The proceeds went partly to Nora and partly to a compensation fund established for Harbor 9 families. She kept no shrine to Daniel and destroyed no photograph. Grief became less orderly once she stopped forcing it to choose between love and truth. Merrick pleaded guilty to racketeering and obstruction. The judge credited his cooperation but refused to confuse it with absolution. He received a 7-year sentence and served 5 years before release under strict supervision. During those years, Ivy wrote to him rarely. Their letters contained no promises, no declarations, and no plans made on the assumption that gratitude was love. Merrick answered every question she asked about his organization and left blank the spaces where an answer would have endangered someone who had not consented to disclosure. Nora finished architecture school, joined a firm that restored public buildings, and eventually spoke at the reopening of the Harbor 9 Memorial Hall. She referred to Daniel as her father and as one of the men who helped hide the truth. She refused to reduce him to either sentence. 5 years after the night in Booth 6, Ivy returned to the rooftop bar. The ownership had changed, the lights were brighter, and the old booth had been replaced with 2 chairs facing the city. At 39, she wore red lipstick for the first time since Daniel's funeral. Not the old shade, and not from the old tube. Merrick arrived at 1:46. Prison had threaded silver through his long hair and removed the effortless authority of men who never hear the word no. He stopped several feet from her table. "You asked to see me," he said. "I did." He waited until she invited him to sit. A server brought 2 sealed bottles of sparkling water. Merrick opened his own and left hers untouched. Ivy noticed the gesture, then opened the bottle herself. At 1:47, she raised the glass. The minute had once belonged to Daniel's final unanswered call. Later it belonged to Jonas's threat and the secret Merrick recognized across a dark room. Now it belonged to no dead man, no blackmailer, and no protector. "I do not know what this becomes," Ivy said. Merrick looked at her without reaching across the table. "Neither do I." It was the first future either of them had entered without hiding the terms. Ivy drank, and Booth 6 held no secret between them.